Okay, so this is 9 things I wish I knew before building an AI company. We're about 8 or 9 months in at this point. Um, and so yeah, these are just some things that I've learned to this point that I think might be helpful if you're either building an AI company or deciding to work with one, right? Or work for one. First thing is agentic prompting, different than like chatbot prompting, to be fair. So agentic prompt engineering is more about designing decision-making frameworks rather than step-by-step instructions. So the old approach that we took to this was more of like we're setting up a custom GPT situation, and honestly a little bit different to that as well, because what we try to do is basically fit everything into the prompt. So like every possible decision, all the entire decision tree, decision making, like not even just the decision making matrix, but like literally the step by step sequential, right? If this happens, then do that, or step by step conditional. So each decision was spelled out, and what we tried to do is capture like all possible edge cases in a single prompt and like hope for the best, essentially. Every tool call was explained thoroughly, so like it wasn't enough for us to say like, okay, go and like send an email, call the email tool. It was like when you want to send an email, call the send email tool, send message tool, and input these parameters, and then even then we would like use the input data and automatically insert that into the tool input like parameters anyway, and just ask the agent to just call the tool, and like come up with the message itself, right? Trying to like decrease the amount that was in the prompt. So we were already trying to decrease the amount that we were fitting into the prompt, but it was still just like massive, right? And it was too conditional, right? It was like if X, run whatever. Uh, Tool A, respond with template B, right? I realize this doesn't actually make a lot of sense, but I think you guys get the point, right? If then. The result was that like we had constant hallucinations and we were just constantly tweaking the prompt, right? And so like here's a reference, like this was like our old prompt template where we had objective, we had context, and we still have some of this, but like this right here is what I'm talking about, action parameters. So every single parameter that goes into creating a calendar event was listed, and we listed it, within. And the funny thing is like even the way that these things are built now, this still kind of happens already. Like when an agent is wanting to call a tool, it usually the schema for the API call that needs to be made, the tool call, gets appended to the prompt anyway. So like if I go to N8N, just open up a random workflow and go to like agent, we say there, and let's say we just add a tool here. We could say like add this tool. Uh, let's say we add like an actual node as a tool, like Airtable. So here, the schema is already defined here in this like node, right? Like it's like we don't necessarily have to say like, here are all possible like parameters for a certain like API endpoint. Make sure that you have like the right input values for each parameter, right? And then like here's what each of those fields or parameters like means. It doesn't have to go into the system prompt itself because when the agent is going to call the tool, the schema for the tool gets appended to the prompt essentially anyway, right? So the agent knows like if I'm calling this singular tool, these are the parameters, right? It's not getting all of those parameters listed, but it's at least getting that parameter, right? And so we obviously went from like super, super long prompts like this, even the instructions, even the output requirements, right? I mean, some of this stuff is still required, right? You still need output requirements. You still need kind of like your objective and your context. But now you can write, in my mind, with the way that these models have improved, you can write these prompts to be more about, hey, you have these series of tools available to you. In fact, you have two tools available to you. You have a tool that tells you the tools that you have available to you, and then you have the tool that executes those tools, right? And the rest of the prompt is just how do you make a decision on what to do and, plan those steps accordingly, right? Like giving it context about the business itself, the input data, the exact scenario, right? The context needed to handle a certain scenario, the guidelines around making that decision, right? Certain policies in place. So we've kind of moved more in that direction, which I'll get into here in a second. So our new approach. Now we've started to hard code deterministic logic. If it doesn't need to go into the prompt, if it's something that we can just throw an if node on there or a switch or a filter, we're going to do that most likely. And we're going to boil it all the way down to like, where's the actual like LLM part of this? And how flexible does this LLM need to be, right? Like if we're building like an automation where it is pretty deterministic, then it's just, we're dropping an LLM node in there and it's part of the process. Anything could happen. You need to capture all these edge cases. It's more, okay, where is this input data coming from? How do we structure it before it hits the LLM? How do we also pull necessary context like a customer record from a CRM or order history from, you know, Sticky or something, or like Georgia's, and package it up nicely and then give it to the LLM to go and like take the actions that it needs to take, right? So, and the funny thing is like this hard code deterministic logic thing is not even, we're working on something that I'll get into in a second where like that might even be modularized here if we get it right, which I think we will. And we want to give the LLM thinking space. So like when we kind of define the overarching objective, right, the macro, the KPI, and then we say, hey, like these are the boundaries, right? We don't do this, we don't do that, we definitely don't do this. This is what we're about. This is what we do. This is who we sell to. This is why we sell it. This is what we sell. When you're speaking with customers, like stay within these guardrails, right? We're just setting up the playing field, essentially, the sandbox, setting up the rules, right? And then what we want to allow the LLM to do is be the playmaker. So if these LLMs are going to be basically commoditized intelligence for us, general commoditized intelligence, can reason, understand, and generate, then understand, then, do we really want to say like, okay, let me write down my exact thought process for all of this and reformat it into a prompt and give it to this LLM? It's like, yes, but we kind of want to give the LLM the ability to kind of like make plays, right? Because there's an example with AlphaGo where it was playing like the master Go champion guy and made some like crazy move that like all the humans, all the experts in Go were like, what is going on? Like it just made a crazy move. And that move ended up like working out because like, 37 moves later, it came in handy. It like established its position in the right way. And it all like made sense. And it's like, well, in that scenario, this AI, this artificial intelligence, I don't think it was an LLM, was given the guardrails of the game, right? It's Go. Here are all the possible moves that you can make. Here's literally the set of rules. There are no edge cases. Like figure out how to win. It uncovered new ways to win, right? And so that's kind of what we want to allow. We want to allow these things to uncover like new ways to win. And one of the things that really gave this away and let me kind of let go of the grip a little bit when it comes to like prompting is I worked really hard on one prompt and I was pretty like I felt really good about it, and it was getting decent results on the output. But then I just pasted it into ChatGPT and said like, hey, write a variation of this prompt that's like better, right? And here's like the goal. And it gave me the prompt. I was like, okay, yeah, decent prompt. Plugged it in, and it did like significantly better than my prompt did. And I was thinking, man, and then I read it and I was thinking, okay, it spelled out some things in a way that I had overlooked at the time, right? As being like obvious or assumed knowledge. And this thing spelled it out. It also didn't include a lot of things that I did include that I thought were going to be necessary. Like you got to know this, or it's got to know how to handle that. But it didn't include those things. And so that's what tells me sometimes the LLM is actually better at making those plays if we just give it the right bounds, the right guardrails, right? So what we learned, over specifying led to underperforming. Guardrail, why? Like, why are you doing this? Plus guardrails beats like the long, like how to do something 9 times out of 10. And the prompts are hypotheses, they're not code. We can measure them, but it's not like when you're writing code, you can without even hitting run, if you're really meticulous, you can go and read the code and figure out if it's going to work or not. without even hitting run. With prompting, it's not the same, right? You have to hit run. You have to see what comes out on the other end, and you got to do it at scale so that we have enough data to see like, okay, how well does this perform? Is it 97%? Is it 98%? Or is it more like 80%, 60%, 40%, right? Like how much of a problem are we facing here? So like, for example, our customer success bot got 20% improvement in agent output appropriateness. This is one of the things that we measure, one of the metrics we measure after one framework swap. So we went from, if you get this question, you answer in this way. If it's this question, you answer in this way. And the issue with this one was the overarching like approach was we need to decrease the number of refunds that are given out. And there's certain ways that you could do it. You could offer, an upsell to a product that might help with their problem. Maybe they don't actually need a refund. Maybe they would keep the product if someone was there to help them with kind of the technical issues that they were facing, right? Or maybe they were misinformed about kind of like what the fine print of the product itself. And so they thought it would be one thing and it was actually the other. And so they don't qualify for a refund, right? So like, and the issue is like the humans team is giving away too many refunds too easily and sometimes offering refunds when, the person didn't even ask. And so it's like, okay, all we need to do is basically provide the refund when it is appropriate, right? And so like go down a couple of different paths first to avoid giving the refund. And generally, you're not going to be able to capture all of those edge cases, especially in this scenario, because you don't necessarily know why, like, because everybody who's coming in is coming in for a problem, right? So like this is e-commerce. If somebody is talking to your customer success team, your customer support team, there's usually an issue at hand, and usually they are frustrated, right? Like the sentiment analysis on average is not good with this kind of customer support interaction. So it's not enough to just say like, hey, if somebody's like really, really angry and requesting a refund, like offer the refund because like a lot of people, like everyone who comes in is like really frustrated. It's just like, how do you navigate that scenario from a framework point of view, right? Not a step by step. If they say this, if the sentiment analysis is that, you respond with X, right? It's if they're requesting a refund, you know that we're trying to avoid those. Here are your options, right? To avoid those. Here's what you can offer. Here's what you can say, right? And it's only to a certain point do you then say, okay, let's execute this refund, essentially. And so 2 and 3 kind of go together because 3 is causality is slippery. It's really hard with a prompt to understand like why something did or did not work. Code, it's easy because it gives you the red lines. Hey, there's a bug right here, like fix this line. Uh, But with prompting, it's like, where is the issue? Where is it getting tripped up? You don't necessarily know. The only way you know is you just keep getting reps. You just keep prompting these things over and over and over again. And then you realize, like, oh, okay, a mixture of a little bit of like urgency and emotion, plus very straightforward, like one line instruction sets, like sequential instructions, plus like headers. You start to get kind of a familiarity with like how to communicate with these things. But it's really hard to say like, oh, okay, like this line right here is really what's throwing it off. Occasionally, when you've seen enough prompt, you've written enough prompt, you can do that. But hey, why were there more refunds given out this month than last month? And you look at all the responses, and you're like, well, you know, I'm not sure, right? Like the thing had decided to give out more refunds. We can identify many scenarios where it shouldn't have done that, and the percentage of refunds would have been the same as the month prior, but it decided to do that. And it's like, well, we did make a change to the prompt. Usually, you would say, yeah, it's that change, but that change is necessary because it's an instructional change, right? And it's not necessarily about the refund necessarily, but by adding that line, it might cause an issue of like lost in the middle, right? So like a very important instruction about the refund decision making, framework that is being lost because we added a couple lines at the bottom. That could be the reason. It could be the reason that the lines that we added at the bottom were contradictory to some of the lines around like refund pushback. And so again, causality is slippery. With code, it's easy, right? Oh, this is syntax error, or I'm using the wrong function, or the logic doesn't make sense, right? Like it's very much mathematical, and this is honestly why I think a lot of developers, traditional developers and engineers, have issues with LLMs because you just can't. It's like hard to predict it. You're better, you get better at it the more you do it, but it's hard to predict. Four, use emotion. Like I said, for some reason, because these things, it's about the attention. That's kind of what they cracked, right? Like it could predict the next word, fine. But how does it understand what you're saying and what you're going for? It's because it has parameters, it has weights on what it puts attention on in a given sentence. So if I were to say, if I were to say, um, if I were to say, this cat, man, it's really fast versus, well, yeah, this cat, man, it's really fast. The LLM could be like, okay, man, is man the thing that I should pay attention to? And the man's really fast. The cat, is it really fast? Is the cat being fast the thing that matters, right? In the context of what's being said, or is it the fact that it's a cat? Does that matter, right? And so it's attention on what the person's actually saying. So that's kind of how these things understand what we are prompting it to do. That's why everyone spells bad, spells poorly now, and prompts like, whatever. And everyone's getting dumber because these things understand what we're going for. And so when you add emotion, it heightens that attention layer, right? It's like all caps, exclamation point, do not do this, or always remember to do this. It's not just that you wrote it as a line in the prompt, but that there's like emotion being conveyed to the LLM, thus applying more like focus and attention to what you're saying, right? So that's why emotion, I think, is important. So the big takeaway is design the rules of the game and let the LLM play within those boundaries and use your KPIs as a scoreboard, right? You know, is the agent performing how you want it to perform? Well, are there KPIs associated with that? Is the refund rate going down? The bonus here is think about agents as individual contributors whose performance can improve, degrade, or remain static over time. And I say this because right now there's a big wave of AI automation. And I think it's because a lot of people don't think we are quite at the agent era yet. There's obviously a lot of momentum being built right now going towards it, especially with these model upgrades and MCP, A2A, all that stuff. But like this when you're thinking about using LLMs in the context of automation, you're thinking about automation just working, just being a part of the software stack that works for your system. If you open up Gmail and it doesn't load, you're like, okay, this thing doesn't work. But if it loads and it just sits there and does nothing, you know, you're not saying, oh, this thing doesn't work. It's not providing any emails for me, right? You're not expecting this thing to hit some kind of KPI or, oh, this thing doesn't work. It's not responding on my behalf to like people who are emailing me. It's because you're not expecting it to do that, right? It's just the software works. Okay, cool. But if it's an agent and the agent is responding, then it's more of a question of, is it responding in the right way? Is it responding at the right time? Is it responding to the right people with the right context, right? That's a different kind of metric to start basing things off of. And so the sooner, if you're building these things, the sooner you get your mind around these things are should be based on performance, not necessarily, system health, right? System health, of course, that's a baseline. But like when you base it on performance, it gives you room for error and it sets your expectations where it's like, hey, a salesperson, they might hit quota 11 months out of 12, and you understand that and you accept that because you're like, okay, look, this thing isn't a robot. This person's not a robot. They're performing very well most of the year, and they're actively contributing to the growth of the company, right? This is a valuable team member, right? I'm not going to say that they just suck because they didn't get it for 1 month. You would be doing that if you expected agents to be 100% as well, right? So like start to think about these things as individual contributors with KPIs attached to them that can improve over time or degrade over time, right? So our roadmap, especially with agentic prompting, is live KPI monitoring and auto-triggering A/B prompt versions. So variations of prompts, testing those, improving it over time, right? Okay, hey, we pushed back on refunds. It went from 8% down to 7%, was our refund rate. Fantastic. That's massive, right? A 1% decrease in the amount of refunds is huge on the back end. And I'll get into this on the flywheel effect. Well, how do we get that from 7% to 6%? Is it the same prompt? Likely not. we can run it with the same prompt, but how about we test it against another prompt that might be able to get us 6%? And then once we get to 6, how do we get it to 5? And then how do we get it to 4, right? How do we try to continue to improve over time, the performance over time? Well, without having the right unique prompt every single time as a human, we are creating kind of like like a prompt optimization workflow. But again, this is a challenge because causality, it's slippery. The couple of times that we've run this, it goes off the rails after like 3 or 4 because maybe we've reached a point where, hey, we cut this thing down by like 3%. It's still trying to improve, which is good, but it kind of like over improves, right? And then you have LLMs. Like LLMs aren't great at the negative. Whenever you say like don't do this or um, try not to do this, it's worse at understanding that than like positive, like do this or try to do this, right? For some reason, that seems to be the case. But for an LLM like optimizer, for some reason, these things are like, okay, it identified that it responded with "Hello, Mary" instead of "Hey, Mary!" exclamation point, right? Like the intro was different than we expect it to be based on the guidelines. Okay. So the LLM that is optimizing the prompt for the LLM that's like responding to the person is like, okay, let me add a line that says, do not start your email with hello, name. And it's like, okay, it obviously is missing the point there where like, yes, we've successfully assigned causality, right? Because we said, okay, maybe not causality, but we successfully identified um, that this agent did not respond in a way that fits within our guidelines. It didn't affect the conversation necessarily, but it was wrong. And so when an LLM is looking at it, it's like, okay, well, it's wrong, but the output, the KPIs didn't change. Do you still optimize, right? So this prompt optimization flow is a work in progress, and I think it's going to be a huge, huge unlock, especially when it's automated and we know that it's not going to go off the rails. Huge, huge unlock. Next thing is model selection. So the model you choose is often the difference between a production-ready system and a cool proof of concept. This is something that my mind has changed on quite a bit as of late. So the old approach was like, I'm just going to use OpenAI's models. Specifically, it was GPT-4 at the time. I'm just going to use GPT-4. It's obviously the best one out there. Um, None of the other players had really caught up at the time. And most people, including ourselves, were more comfortable working with it, prompting it, and working with the API. And so, and honestly, I think it was the right approach because it just kept things super simple, especially when our initial clients, like, we're just going to use OpenAI, we're going to use ChatGPT. Most of you already have an account. Like, let's just use this one. We're also more comfortable prompting it. And that worked for like simple, like automations that weren't as high stakes. But as we started to build more robust agentic systems that are um, much higher stakes, there's a lot more responsibility on these systems. It's become clear that like the model you choose for certain tasks makes like it literally makes the difference between this thing like works versus this thing is useless essentially, right? And it worked, right? Like this model of like, hey, we're just going to use the best model that exists worked really well until Anthropic caught up, until DeepSeek came out, until Gemini has actually gotten pretty good, until Grok has gotten pretty good, right? And then each of those have their own kind of way that you prompt them, and you only learn how to prompt them by getting the reps in and just prompting them and getting comfortable with them. Um, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. It adds more complexity, but and so this breakdown here, I wanted to make it better, but when you really think about it, these models are so similar. The only difference really comes down to like the context window and um, the context window. And then a lot of it also comes down to kind of their compatibility with some of the tool calling. Like MCP, Claude is better at calling MCP servers. Is better than Gemini. Gemini sucks at calling tools. It just does. But it has a long context window and it does live web search. And this, honestly, the context window is a huge unlock because things that we used to put into a vector database and do RAG on, we literally just call a sub workflow that is a an agent with Gemini. We basically just calling Gemini with massive prompt in there, and that that works faster a lot of times, and it's more accurate a lot of times. Next thing, Claude 3.7 Sonnet. This has been a favorite of mine recently. Not so much anymore now that O3 is out and O3 Mini is out, but this one I think has better memory, so it stays on topic longer. And I understand that I'm kind of looking at this from a chatbot point of view, like their actual, web page where you interact with the chatbot, not always like the agent. But Claude, like this one is really good when I want to do high level like reasoning. And so the way that I build my agents now, the architecture is like the same way every time. There's a planner, executor, and a verifier. Planner ingests the input data, has access to the tool list and the schemas, and puts together like, okay, like this is exactly what we're supposed to do given the scenario, right? And then puts together the instruction set, which honestly becomes the prompt for the executor, pushes it to the executor, executor executes all the API calls sequentially, and then verifier verifies that everything went okay, right? So, and genuinely, when you abstract your prompts out of like the actual thing and it becomes like a log in Supabase and you pull them in dynamically, that literally is the only that's the structure you need for all of these agents. And it might be you only need one of those things, right? One of those workflows, planner, executor, verifier, that chain. That's all you need. It really is all you need. So all of these multi-chained, multi-sub agent things are like really unnecessary because people are hard coding their prompts in there, which means that it's harder to edit the prompt faster. And it's harder to focus on the thing that actually matters in these systems, which is the prompt, right? The instructions. Anyway, Claude 3 Sonnet, I usually put at the planner stage because it's better at just like understanding things. GPT 4.5, this one came out. So this one is really nice for human sounding, conversational, external communication. This one's good. It's good at that. It's good at sounding human and not super dry, usually. Grok, this one I haven't explored a ton when it comes to agentic, and it needs more testing. But I know that it is kind of it was the best chatbot experience for the longest time. I think it understood people really, really well. It obviously has access to Twitter or X, and the fact that it has access to X is like the real value of it, in my opinion. It's enjoyable to talk to. It like understands whatever, but all of these models pretty much understand, and you can get them to talk to you in an enjoyable way if you really want. But I haven't tested enough on Agentic to give like a firm opinion on it. Um, so that's pretty much it. I mean, the moral of the story here is we're going to pick the right model for the job and then lean in heavily on the prompt. So what we learned was the same prompt could produce a deviation of 20% in the output quality depending on the model. We ran a scenario where we ran into our prompt optimization flow, and all of the data that we're working with is like literally human tagged data, right? So we know that it's good. And so we're testing kind of the results based on the human tag data, the human result. And we had a certain prompt. This is for customer success, by the way. We had a certain prompt. We ran it through 4.0. We kept editing the prompt, ran it through 4.0, editing the prompt, ran it through 4.0. And we had this scale where the lower number you had, the better. And it was like basically 1 to 10. It was 1 to 0. It was 0 to 1, but like let's just say 1 to 10. Let's say 0 to 1 because it'll make more sense. 0 to 1, the higher the number, right? If it was like 0.9, it means that the output was vastly different than what the human metrics were, right? So it was just like bad result. The lower, the better, right? And so when we ran it through like 10 times with 4.0, we essentially went from 85 down to 65. I think we touched 60 at the last point. And so we were like, okay, yeah, this thing is improving. Great. And then the most recent prompt, the best one we had so far, we kept that prompt there. We switched out the 4.0 for Claude 3.7, and it got 4.5, right? 0.45. It went from zero point 0.6 the best to 0.45. And I honestly think it was like 0.65. The prompt we used for 0.65 was the same prompt we used with 3.7. and then we got 0.45. Same prompt, different model, 20% difference. That was like the light bulb moment of like, okay, we are not paying enough attention to the actual model that we're using for these systems. And if we did, it might remove some of the challenges that we're facing in trying to get these things to be production ready, right? To be deployed live at high scale, dealing with tons of volume, right? And so bad outputs does not always mean bad prompt. Bad outputs does not always mean bad model, right? You could have to find the Goldilocks zone of model to prompt combo. Like, what is the right model? And then what's the right prompt? And like the way that you prompt each of these models has to be like slightly different to get the most out of them. And so, you know, you have to have like a framework for each model and how to prompt it, which is hard because these models improve pretty often. And like the way that we would have prompt for GPT-4 is different than how we would have prompt O1, which is different than how we prompt O3, right? And O3 is different than how we prompt O3 mini slightly, right? It's not major, but it is slight. And so the takeaway is like stop over tuning prompts on the wrong model. Write the right prompt for the right model, right? First, identify the model that makes the most sense for the given scenario, and then just dial in that prompt for that specific model. Like that's and what we do is we do a lot of model testing now. So like it's easier to tell what's the right model. And so what's on our roadmap is like fine tuning. We think that there is that this is kind of like the next step in improving the outputs like massively, because otherwise you just need too many guardrails and automations to get like to make it production ready. There, you just need too many automations and guardrails around like the output and the input before it hits the LLM, just like wrapped around the LLM. You just need all of this scaffolding just to make sure that it doesn't like screw up. But I think if we fine tune on certain scenarios, right? Like we have a law firm and we're building a system to essentially be a legal assistant for the firm. And so, you know, if I showed you the process map on that, it'd be like, and you're not a lawyer, you'd be like, man, this is like another language, right? Because there's a whole industry, there's an industry jargon, there's a language, there's a cadence, there's you know, standards, right? There's norms, right? So like, if we can fine tune it on that stuff and then write our prompts accordingly, we think that we're going to get better results. Um, And then, yeah, standardized prompting techniques based on the scenario and the model. I think the scenario, sure, the model, that will likely have to be updated all the time, right? And something I should add here is like when a new model comes out, testing, like figuring out what that prompt framework should be, right away. Next thing is custom tooling. So custom development tools are better than off-the-shelf tools 9 times out of 10. So the old approach was, I mean, we were early, right? So we thought uh, we were early as non-engineers, non-developers, right? So you can imagine the imposter syndrome at that time. And so what we were doing was like, okay, you know, somebody has to have thought about this and has a solution out there. There's got to be a solution out there, right? And so like every time a new release came out, we were like, oh yeah, these guys solved it, you know, whatever. These guys have the answer to our problem. Um, and each time we thought we found the silver bullet, and the overarching sentiment here was we thought other people had things figured out. And what we quickly realized, which I'll talk about in a second, is like nobody has it figured out. Everybody's hacking away at this. Everybody's new. Um, yeah, this is an even playing field, essentially. So our new approach is really we're going to build our own tools, and we're going to build them for data processing, labeling, and cleaning, which we already kind of have some of those. API function calling, which I'm really excited about that one. Data retrieval, prompt engineering. There's going to be more, I guarantee. I have a list of like 11 that I want to build. And it also gives us full control. So like this is a common issue with SaaS, with anything really. When you're trying to build a SaaS product, you want to make it, you want to capture some market, right? And obviously, like, you know, the back half of kind of the SaaS craze over the last decade was like, okay, we're going to do super niche. We're going to do like micro SaaS. We're going to go after a specific problem and know our customer and like solve that problem. And you know, whatever, right? But initially it wasn't like that. And even with this whole micro SaaS niche thing, it's like I guarantee every operator has felt the the tech stack bloat, the none of these solutions really kind of solves the problem. They all solve their own individual problem, and like all together, it makes up something like it's kind of useful, but it's like a pain in the ass. Um, and like it makes sense, right? Because it's an off the shelf solution. It's not custom built for you. You don't have a lot of control over certain aspects of things, right? And if you do want certain aspects of things, you gotta upgrade. You gotta pay for the upgrade, right? So for us, it was like, look, we've tried all of these solutions. None of them are quite the thing we're looking for. We are trying to build this, right? And the big one that I'm thinking about is the agentic database. We're trying to build this agentic database. It requires a ETL pipelines from input data. It requires processing events data, storing it in a specific way that's relational and not necessarily, I mean, not at all usually like RAG, like it's not going to be in a vector database. It's got it like we had all of these requirements for how this thing needed to be in order to work, right? And everybody had their like RAG as a service, and everybody has their kind of thing. Everybody, a lot of these like tools out there have elements of it and are certainly further ahead in certain areas than we are in terms of building out certain things like scaffolding, right? Because they're focused on a singular issue and they want to solve that problem, but none of it ever really coalesced into just the holistic thing that we're looking for, because it's not just that we need this functionality, but we need it to play with the other things that we're building, right? Like the system as a whole has to be cohesive, and pulling in a bunch of off-the-shelf tools that don't necessarily fit perfectly, it's kind of like, okay, it's stacking bricks that are just like a centimeter off each layer. Eventually that thing's going to collapse, right? So anyway, gave us more control. It was more relevant and effective solutions for our clients, faster iteration cycles, obviously. And we also like, we're developing IP, which is a valuable thing, obviously. So what we learned, we spent months tool hopping. Even like AI machine learning teams face the same roadblocks we do. Like we literally talk to a ton of teams. We're all facing the same kind of like challenges, right? And the off-the-shelf agentic AI tools are just like SaaS platforms today. They're helpful, but never 100% solve your specific needs. These catch-all tools force you to bend your architecture to their limits. This is so true. Like the reason why I like N8N is because it gives us a lot of flexibility, right? There's not a ton of layers of abstraction there. There are some, right? But not a ton. And but a lot of these other ones, like there's too many layers of abstraction. We can't really dig into like, hey, we've architected in this way. We want it to work in this way. But it literally just can't, right? And so it becomes a thing of like, okay, we're using this tool, which means we've got to architect it in this way, right? And we were just tired of doing that. It affects the logic of the system, right? And can have major limiting effects. Very, very true. No vendor has the done for you answer. Everyone is still hacking. Takeaway, we are the only ones who know the tools that we need, so we must build them ourselves. Just came to that realization a couple months ago, leaning all the way in on it. And honestly, it's way more fun anyway to do it like this. So the roadmap, this is only a couple things. I tried to list as many as I was thinking at the time, but dynamic tools, huge thing on my list. We're at the process of like pushing it to production internally, QA testing, and once that thing works, man, it's going to be huge. Anyway, prompt eval framework and workflow. This is something we've been working on, and we're continuing to dial in into like a true framework that can be applied across the board, right? Prompt optimization framework and workflow, same deal. High volume testing infrastructure. So when we go in during a discovery, like consulting process upfront, right? And we're trying to understand the team, the workflows, the outcomes expected, the tech stack that they use, right? What we try to do like day one, if we can, is integrate with their systems and start to see the real-time live data come in, right? Like, okay, is this agent is going to be a legal assistant. Legal assistants live in their inbox. Let's go ahead and start looking at what a day looks like in the inbox of a legal assistant. Let's start getting that in there. And then as we're learning from you, getting your knowledge base, understanding how you categorize these emails, how you handle certain scenarios, can we start to teach the agent, hey, this email comes in, can it understand just first, can it understand what it just read, right? Does it understand that this is this type of email? And I'm not even going to say the next part, which is like, and what to do. Like, can it just understand that this is this type of email first, right? High volume testing infrastructure, right? Like, can we just push a bunch of emails in there and can we handle that kind of system in and of itself? And then also go back 3 months and see historical data and run that through as well, right? It's not even just testing, it's like processing. We have the infrastructure now for this, by the way, which is funny. API research and API reference workflow. This ties in with dynamic tools. This is just like, okay, we've our client has filled out kind of like our intake form. They've listed their tech stack in that form. Let's just trigger a deep research, go grab all the API docs, grab all the API schemas, load them up into uh, Airtable or Supabase, and it's ready to go, right? API research, especially with new platforms, because we do custom, is a huge time suck sometimes. It's not just like research, like go online and read things and take notes. It's like setting up the API, executing it, seeing that it's only giving you like an ID and that you have to use this ID for like this API call to grab this ID so you can do this API call to actually get the thing that you really need. And it's like, you know, you kind of you got to start playing with these things to like figure out what the flow is. Or you could just do the research, get the understand kind of like the data flow map, the diagram. I forget what it's called. It's like a database schema diagram, I think. Database, yeah. Yeah, something like this, where you understand like, okay, the order ID goes here, for the orders. So if you're looking at if you want to grab your orders, you got to have the order ID. It's like, okay, okay. Yeah, order items, product ID, quantity. Okay, so the orders come in. This is the list of all the orders. If you want to grab the actual order itself, like, okay, this customer made an order. Which products did they buy in that order? It's like, okay, let me get a list of orders, find the customer, grab the order ID of the order that I'm talking about, get all the product IDs from that order, and then and then go get the product that I'm talking about using one of the product IDs, right? And so it's like multi-step. Okay, just to get the freaking product that the person ordered, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do all this. So, but it's helpful to have this diagram here because we do know, like, okay, if I want to get to products and I have this information, this is how I would get there, right? So that's part of the API research, and then events data processing workflow, right? So as new emails come in, as new Slack messages are being sent, as new meeting transcripts are being loaded up and processed, like we need to be able to process that information and understand it. One, right? Like, okay, the salesperson has sent 25 emails this week and they had 12 sales calls. Um, what did they do in between the time, right? One salesperson had the exact same numbers but closed double the amount. What was done, right? And we can kind of tell by looking at the events data, like where they went, what they explored, what they read, how they wrote their email, what context did they pull in to write that email, yada, 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 right? If we can see the events data. And so what I want to do is have like a timeline map of, okay, exactly that. Like it's 8 a.m. Salesperson logs in, they open up their inbox, they immediately spend the first hour on their follow-up sequences, right? And during the follow-up sequence, they're writing an email at 8:03 and they say, "Hey John, do you have blah 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 blah?" And they realize, "Oh wait, I need to go and get the information about John so I can make this actually relevant so that it's saved as a draft." They open up the CRM, they type in John's name, they go to the contact record for John, they scroll down and they read like whatever they were looking for, and then they go back to the inbox and they finish out the email. And the events data will tell us that. It won't, you know, if we were just talking to John, it was like one of those interviews, he would just say, "Yeah, I open up my inbox, I do my follow-ups for an hour." And it's like, okay, cool. But what are the details there, right? What context did you need to write a good email? That's important because we can tell the agent, hey, here's you have access to a CRM. Here's how to write really good follow-up emails. Uh, there's some data in the CRM that might help, right? So the events data processing is really, really key. And when that kind of comes together, which I think is a larger project than I had initially anticipated after talking to some folks, I would love to show a visual and like what exactly that looks like, right? Because once you do that, then you can start to pinpoint the AI opportunities, right? Like, okay, salesperson, there's 4 hours out of the day that like an AI could do exactly what the salesperson is doing. Uh, let's go ahead and drop in drop in an LLM there, and see what happens. Even playing field. So we're on an even playing field. That's what I'm going for here. So most businesses miss the boat with traditional automation, but now have the opportunity to skip directly to agentic AI. Um, and so what I used to think is I genuinely thought every business had Zapier at least implemented, or like make, right, implemented. I like, for me personally, I didn't understand how you could run a business that was majority like online or using software without having used systems like these, because of just the sheer amount of like annoyance it is to like copy and paste data from like one platform to another. It's super annoying. Um, and so I thought like every business was like, yeah, I'm using Zapier. I'm using this automation. It's a great tool. Obviously, I'm going to use it like step one. I also thought they were actively tracking AI. They kind of knew what was coming out. And I thought everyone thought that like AI was like brain dead obvious. Like, yeah, obviously, okay, I have Zapier implemented now. Uh, AI has come out. How does this going to apply, right? And so I had assumed that more businesses and business owners had more streamlined and automated processes in place. What you realize is that's just not true. So new approach is like, hey, when these folks come in, most of them haven't even done regular automation. It's like, okay, fine. And so they come in with kind of like a regular automation type idea on where this thing can go. And it's like, yeah, okay, yes, we can keep your CRM data clean, right? Like, yes, we can capture the info on a lead form and push it to the CRM and like put them on automated sequence. Like, fine. That's all doable. That was doable 10 years ago. That was doable 15 years ago. Uh, but that's not where we're at anymore, right? If we start talking about traditional automation, now that we have LLMs, people are excited about traditional automation. Oh, okay. Now we could throw an LLM in there. Like now this automation is like super powerful. It is. It is. But this is old now. It's yesterday. Um, you could still get 20 to 30% improvement by implementing traditional automation if you don't have any right now. You might even get 100% in operational efficiency improvement. But it's 2015 tech, and you should have been there in 2015, right? It's not, we're in a new era now, right? Like these LLMs provide us an opportunity to be AI first, AI native, and to have it be the underlying operating system for the business itself on a performance basis, not just a technology basis. Like, is this thing converting warm leads to booked appointments at a um, at a really good, conversion rate? And is it improving over time, or is it getting worse over time? Right? We haven't had to necessarily base software on KPIs like this before, right? We do now, but it requires a mental shift and kind of like these systems and what to expect out of them. Skip traditional automation. It's pointless at this point. It just is. These LLMs can orchestrate automations themselves. They can build automations themselves. Like ask ChatGPT to build you an N8N workflow. It will do that. N8N, I guarantee, is working on an N8N workflow builder as we speak. Like, there's no reason to worry about, oh, I need this automation to like, what, like, it's pointless. You start thinking about your business, your knowledge base, your business logic, the outcomes you want to face, the outcomes you want to see, the actual like value you provide, right? Your edge in the market. Like, it's starting to think about more like true like business problems. And if your arbitrage here, if your edge is operational, it's time to start thinking about a pivot, most likely. Like, if that's all you have is like we're just better operationally than the other guys because we use like automations, it's time to start thinking about something else, frankly. So what we learned, 70% plus of businesses never touch Zapier or Make or other traditional automation platforms, right? Even fewer were utilizing RPA. I don't blame them. RPA is kind of difficult. Um, and there's a ton of low hanging fruit out there. Even basic automations for a lot of these businesses could add like 10 to 30% more productivity. We're not playing with 10 to 30% more productivity anymore. Like that should sound very low to you at this point. You should be thinking about 1,000% increase. You should be thinking about a paradigm shift on how this thing operates. Like, anyway. Agentic systems use automations, but are not automations themselves. They use the automations. The automations are just, you know, they're whatever. The agentic system is the thing that uses it, right? Instead of having like a team of Filipino virtual assistants plus like Zapier automation as like your systems, your systems to scale, the agentic system will orchestrate the automations for you, right? And build them even when needed. Automation, obviously rigid if then. Agentic OS, Agentic Operating System. This is the first time I'm mentioning in this video here, but that's our framework, right? An Agentic Operating System. It's a dynamic operating system that puppeteers automations and workflows as part of its tool set. Who cares about 10 to 30% efficiency gains when your whole business is about to be eliminated by a really good model plus prompt plus data set, which is the knowledge base, right? Really good model, really good prompt instructions, and access to your data set, your knowledge base, right? That's clean and kept up and whatever. Like that right there, who cares about 10 to 30% efficiency gains? That's an employee. That's a team. That's a department. That's a business right there. Model plus prompt plus data set. Are we building automations or are we building agentic systems? That's what you need to be asking yourself. Trying to do both takes time away, takes away time, effort, and resources that could be spent on improving our ability to build agentic systems. So this is a question to us, right? This is a question I ask myself. Are we building automations or are we building agentic systems? Well, every time we build an automation that we know is not really what we're going for, takes time, effort, resources away from building the real thing that we're trying to build, which are agentic systems, right? Which is, we've made a lot of strong stances recently because of some of these things. Agentic AI is not AI automation. AI automation is simply an improvement of traditional automation. Agentic AI is a whole paradigm shift. Businesses who missed the automation wave do not need to catch up. Just skip to agentic AI. Just skip. There's no point. So our roadmap, we don't do traditional automations anymore. We just don't. And we focus only on projects that are centered around building an agentic system, right? Like I have a customer success team. They manage the relationship with clients. Each one can handle max about 20 clients at a time. And this team is 50 people. It's like, okay, wow, that's like a huge cost center right there. If you were to rip, first question, if you were to rip that team out entirely, could you still function? Probably not, right? Because they keep everything organized. If you were to map out their workflows and the tasks in their workflows, what percent out of 100 of those workflows can be done by an LLM, right? If the LLM was given given the input data and all we were doing was reading the output at the end, right? Whether it's an action plan or an actual like generated like response to something or document or whatever. If we just gave it to it, like instead of like plugging it all in, it's all integrated, right? Like let's assume it's going to be integrated and then ask the question, would the LLM be able to like actually either execute the task or output what we're looking to output? And if the answer is yes, and that percent out of 100 is like 80, 90% of their job can be done by that, then it's like, oh, shoot, do I really need 50, right? And if I do have 50 and they're all handling 20, can they actually all handle 100 now, right? What does that mean? What does that mean value per employee? What does that mean per like the margins? This is a new mindset, right? A new mindset. Plant a flag. So this is getting more personal about our decisions here as a company. So we are the experts at this point and have enough. We are experts, not the experts. We are experts at this point and have enough reps under our belt to plant our own flag. So this was part of like that imposter syndrome thing, right? So at the beginning, it was like, I'll do what the market says, right? If someone is telling me to build something that they want and it's going to relieve a pain point for them, we're going to build it, right? it's obviously in the sandbox of like we're using N8N and there's like, it's an automation platform and we're using LLMs as part of it and all that. Um, but if you think back, if you're a long time follower of this channel and you went to our website at the time, it was like a 6 minute read. It was a pretty boring like landing page. It was just like a sales letter that I wrote. And the whole pitch was like, we're going to build a master contextual database. And like, that's the thing that is going to like get you a true like AI agent. And it was like early in those days, or I was on LinkedIn making posts before even YouTube, because I tried to build many different agents, and each time I was like, oh man, I gotta attach my Google Drive to this thing again, so it has the right context. I gotta get this, so I gotta make these API calls, so it has the right context. And it's like, my data is here. If this thing could just like access my data, then all of this becomes easier, right? So like that realization happened very early on, and that was the direction that I wanted to go very early on. And then, one thing led to another. The market said, they had their own ideas, right? And I wasn't quite at a place where I could just be like, nope, we're not going to do that. We are going to centralize, contextualize, process your data first. Then we're going to build the agentic layer on top of that. And no matter what happens in the market, whether the models get better, whether the infrastructure, the protocols come out, whatever comes out, the fact that we have your data put together in the right place, easily retrievable, means that we can plug and play new updates, new systems, new tools, right? Because it needs your data regardless. Like that is an inevitable fact. It needs access to your data. That's what gives it everyone has access to ChatGPT, but some people get more out of it than others, right? Same with Midjourney. People who get more out of it are the artists who understand the language of art, photographers. They understand the language of photography, right? So they can write a better prompt, and so they get better output at the end. It's the same deal, what's garbage in, garbage out, right? The same thing. Everyone should get that tattooed on their forehead. But the old approach, we were unsure of our position in the greater AI market landscape, right? We weren't sure how early we were, how late we were, if our ideas were new or novel, or if everyone was thinking the same thing, or if the thought was had 10 years ago and we were just coming on late thinking we were thinking of something cool. And so, in the same thing, unsure of what was like common knowledge, right? Or what's like wrong, right? So we just didn't have the confidence to just be like, nope, this is the way that it should be done. Because frankly, we just didn't have the reps at the time. Um, and we just assumed that more people had it figured out than we did. Realized pretty soon, like quickly after doing like tons of projects, that just wasn't true. And we just found the same patterns that uh, we had anticipated anyway. So the new approach is to say, look, here's a system that will win in the long term, which is what I was saying, right? We build the agentic database. It'll be the single source of truth for the agents. It'll be real time, continually updated based on the events, and easily retrievable for the agents. Then we'll build the agentic layer, and you can have whatever architecture you want. Again, like I said at the beginning, planner, executor, verifier. I think that's all you need, but you build the agentic layer. And then you build dynamic tools, which is that flexible modular API calling that is necessary. Um, and then the primary focus is you need to define the knowledge base and the business logic itself, right? So much of that information is trapped in people's heads. It's that early employee that you hired, and you just kind of threw them in the fire, and they've kind of figured out their own processes and ops and kind of trained people and but it kind of all grew organically. But it's really like one person understands all the inner workings and how this thing is tied together. There's so many companies that have like a spreadsheet that has like thousands and thousands of rows of data, and everything ports into the spreadsheet, and there are tons of formulas and connections, and trying to untangle that thing is impossible. It's a very similar concept for like somebody who's like experienced in a space. They've built the system, they've built the team. It's evolved over time, and they just kind of know like things are just kind of intuitive or based on experience. You see this a lot in the ops roles, like somebody who is like scheduling and tasking subcontractors to go on site to go do work or whatever. These guys understand like who the subcontractor is, what they're good at, their time of day they like to go, like their natural skill set, if they're gonna vibe well with the client, right? Like there are so many like little kind of things that go into making those decisions, that it's hard to kind of teach an LLM to do that, let alone another person, right? And so that is the real primary focus, is like that knowledge base, that business logic. If we can get that out of people's heads and into a database, then we have the business and a database essentially. Like a business, I said this the other day on a call. Business is really just the collection of the actual data that you're collecting and the SOPs, right? It's your processes and your data. The humans are supposed to be replaceable. Like that's the idea, right? The business of a machine, the humans are supposed to be replaceable who operate the machine. It's not always the case, but that's how it's supposed to be, right? And most businesses try to be that way anyway. And so, like, what we'll say is like, hey, look, we're going to build an agentic OS for each of your teams, your sales team, your customer success team, your ops team, project management team, whatever. And the only way to do it is to get a handle of your data and internal knowledge, right? What we learned is 98% of folks in the space are copycats. Almost everyone is waiting for teams like ours to present them with a clear playbook. Everything is a hypothesis, and most things are smoke and mirrors, right? It's just new. It's an emerging space. And so we have an opportunity here to just say, hey, we have a theory on, like, we have an idea on how this is going to work. We have a hypothesis. We have a couple of proof points. And, object, right? If you have a rebuttal to like our approach, like please let us know. But like ours is based on like many hours, days, weeks of doing these projects, of seeing the space, staying up on the research, like really like being obsessive about it. And we've developed this playbook based on not only our initial guesses about the master contextual database and all that, but also what we've truly seen. Like we've kind of said like, oh, okay, what we thought at the beginning is actually true. And now we know even more about how to bring that into reality, right? So, people ask like, who do you keep up with in the AI space? Honestly, all of this year, I haven't listened to much AI content, many AI influencers. Like, I understand where we stand now. I understand where people are pushing the envelope and pushing things forward. And I have my assumptions on what's inevitable, right? The model's getting better, context windows increasing, right? Whatever. Tokens getting cheaper. And now it's a point where it's just build, right? Just build the solutions at this point instead of waiting for somebody to come out with something. Everybody's hacking away. Like, might as well just join the club, start hacking away. So I'm not, yeah, I haven't been tuned into the space as deeply as I used to be because I'm not in information gathering mode at the moment. I'm in building mode, right? I'm about to turn back into information gathering mode when it comes to what I'm doing with knowledge graphs, fine tuning, graph rag. And a couple of other things. But as it is right now, we're in building mode. So the roadmap is now we do these AI development blueprints, right? So because we're trying to build like agentic operating systems and not just AI automations, it's no longer as simple as like, okay, we're going to connect the CRM to the Google Sheet that's going to connect to the Gmail and like, it's just a string of integrations like all connected together. We need to build the foundation first. And that comes with understanding. Like we have to understand how these things are flowing together. Like how many automations have y'all built or seen or used that either get in the way, mess something up, and so they're untrustworthy, right? Or break over time because you guys just pivoted slightly to something else, right? Like you just do something a little bit different. You added a new custom field in your CRM, and now it's like the old one is like irrelevant. So it's like, we're not trying to build like just like a tool. We're trying to build an operating system, right? So in order to do that, we need to go through a discovery process. It's mandatory. We even with the AI automations before, we were misscoping, misquoting. There's a weird thing happening right now where like there's an explosion, especially in n8n, explosion of n8n content of guys like who are AI automation agency guys. They're trying to sell their workflows. They're trying to build a business. I get it, but it comes off as super easy to do, and sometimes it is, but it comes off as super easy to do, which basically signals this is like cheap, right? This is low effort, which is what they're trying to sell. Like, hey, this is a super cheap and low effort thing to do, right? Like, it's a good selling point. But the reality is like to build these things to be production ready, to be high performing, to be at scale, it's not cheap. It's not simple. It's not low effort. It takes a lot of focus. It's new technology. It's non-deterministic technology. And so this whole fallacy of like, oh, it's super easy, I think has just permeated the market. And so we get people who come inbound who expect something to be super like, oh, what? That's the price you're quoting? It's like, yeah, dude. Do you want this thing to work or do you want like a POC off the internet? Because if you want a POC off the internet, I can go and screenshot it, throw it in ChatGPT and tell ChatGPT to just create it, right? Like, there's no reason for us to even be having this conversation at this point because these LLMs can just build these things for you. Like, there's no, that's not our game, right? That's not the game we play currently. This is the game we play. So we do the blueprint, and then we apply the Agentic OS framework to it, right? So like we understand the tech stack, we understand the data flow, we understand where it lives. Now we're going to build the data pipelines. We're going to build a database. We're going to design the database schema. We're going to design like how each thing relates. That's the database schema, right? Which I showed you. And then we're going to start to identify, okay, for the agentic layer, what are the tasks that need to get done? Okay, great. We already have dynamic tools in place, so we can make those tool calls, those function calls when needed. We set up the capture points, right? The input data capture points, right? New emails come in, new thing gets triggered, whatever. Now it's about the prompt, right? We're seeing this events data come in. We understand what's going to be passed through the LLM. Now we need to write the prompts so the LLM acts accordingly, right? This is our process for boiling it down to the prompts, which is the important thing. I cannot say that enough. That is the important thing, and also the actual data, the context data that you have, but that's being taken care of because of the agentic database and the sync. Community building, next thing. So community is a beautiful thing, but only when it aligns with you, your brand, and your interests. So this is kind of a personal one. So the very common thing is like, okay, you start a YouTube channel, picks up a little bit of traction, then you launch a community with like a course, and like then it's all gravy after that. And it's all about tutorial videos and engagement and all. So I'm trashing on community a little, but really that's typically how it's done. And you assume that's going to be easy because it will run itself. You throw up a course, you put a lot of effort into the course, right? But then you hate it when it's done. And then a month later, it's like irrelevant because you've learned new things and you do things differently now. And so it requires like updating the course and just constantly putting out content. And it doesn't feel as authentic or genuine as it should be because it's uninspired, right? It feels like um, a requirement. It feels mandatory. Like, oh, I got to put something out because like, I started this community and like people are paying, right? Like that's what they expect. That is the exchange to be made. And so, when you're building a community, don't set the wrong expectations like I did. So what I'm going to do, the new approach, is I actually like the live interactions. So we do a webinar at 11 a.m. Central every Friday for an hour. And then right after that at noon Central on Friday, we do VIP office hours. And a few guys join every week. And it's like the highlight of the week, right? Because I get to talk to all of these folks who are in the community. We're like on the same wavelength about AI for the most part. And they are actively working on their own projects and pushing things forward in ways that we're not pushing, and they're in industries that we're not in. And ever since I've kind of opened that up and we've done those office hour sessions, I've learned way more in just that month and a half stint than I mean, the speed of learning has increased way more than the speed of learning what it was like 6 months prior. Like it's insane. And it's literally just by live interactions. And it's like building these relationships. You see the same guy in there for the fourth week in a row. You know what they're working on, the challenges they're on. And so you're like, yo, how's that thing going? Like, and then they tell you and they told you how they overcame that challenge. Or if they didn't, it's like maybe I saw something over the week that I was working on that might help. And it's just it's honestly enjoyable to just have the live hangout conversations. It's not enjoyable to just do a bunch of tutorials. I hate doing the tutorials, to be honest with you guys. Like like I built the thing and then I got to go and do a tutorial on how I built the thing, basically rebuilding it. Uh, this is no fun. I want to build the next thing, right? There's tons of content out there. You got ChatGPT, you got YouTube, you got Nate Herc, you got Cole Medine, you got Simon Cotton, you got AI Workshops guy, you got the N8N guys, you got Max over there. There's there's a ton of education out there for like how to build something. Um, I don't think I need to provide that. I think there's plenty of people providing better content out there when it comes to tutorials and how to build stuff, right? And I hate doing it anyway. So I'll just do walkthroughs. Like we have useful templates, like these super agent templates. We're doing a big push now to like really make these easy to kind of download and get going. And I'll do walkthroughs on those on like how it works generally and whatever. But like an actual tutorial, no shot, no shot. Um, and then events. I think in-person events, this is going to be an initiative we start likely in the fall. Just putting together our own events, getting people together. Like we've met a ton of people in person now already. And every time we do that, it's great. Like met one of our clients in Dallas, met one of our clients in DC, met one of them in and not necessarily a client, but a guy we work with, Daniel, in San Jose. Like and each time it's just a great. And I met tons of people in Austin because I'm in this area. It's just a good, in real life it's just great, right? Live interactions, just chatting it up. That stuff I really enjoy. Tutorial videos, not so much. So what I learned really was I should have created a community sooner. I mean, I did like, but it was just like to Discord and there was no plan there. It was just like, hey, here people do communities when they have YouTube channels. So like, here's mine. Um, it's a ton of fun. There's a lot of value and I've learned way more than I would have without it. But it has to be sustainable, right? And so the takeaway is like, I'm not going to copy the creator playbook. I'm just going to design a community that leans into what my strengths and preferences are, and hopefully the right people find it, right? If the right people don't, that's fine. If it's a small community and it's not scaled up to be whatever, community champ, who cares, right? Like that's not really the point. It's not the North Star here. So the roadmap. So what I'm going to do, likely starting this upcoming week, it is May 11th, is open up the VIP Hangouts, not just be like that one day on Friday, but it'll start with two and then we'll push it to three shortly after. We're now getting on a cadence of dropping these super agent templates. So it's not just like, oh, this is like a singular like agent workflow, but it's like here is the super agent and then the various different capabilities that it has with the prompts that go with the capabilities based on the input data. So it's supposed to be a larger thing like a sales super agent or a customer success super agent or inbox manager, which to me is kind of like that gray area of like super agent or not. But anyway, the super agent templates, which I think actually will provide a lot of value, fun events. So live events, but then also like hackathons, build of the week. I asked a few of the guys last week, what if we did like a build of the week? Because a lot of these guys have really cool stuff that they're building, and I just kind of want to showcase it to everybody else. Like, hey, look at what these guys are doing. This guy Lucas, who used to work with us early, he had broken off and he's more of like a lead gen, like um, Facebook ads guy, and he's working with this company. I think it's a nail salon down in Argentina. He's Argentinian, and he built this system that basically books their calls for him through WhatsApp, or yeah, books their appointments through WhatsApp. And you can see the data. It's improving every single week or every single month, and it's bringing them in. It's bringing in a lot of money, and it is a success. And so he wanted to talk about it, and so we brought him in on the office hours, and it was a genuinely like really interesting, good conversation because he got to talk about literally exactly how he built it, what the issues are. People got to ask questions, and it's just, it's tangible. So build of the week, I think will be cool. Hackathons, I think will be cool. Um, I want to add embedded agents. So I know that like all of these community platforms, kind of like offer the ability to kind of put your own, features in there, which are like agents now. Everyone's slapping agents on their landing pages. Um, and so that's what we'll do. Like I have an idea for like AI news feed, prompt generators, N8N workflow builder, which might be irrelevant. Like I guarantee N8N is building this right now. I guarantee it. I don't have an inside line on that necessarily. I don't think. Yeah. And then the most exciting thing I think is I'm going to move off of Circle. So we use Circle right now. Didn't want to use School. So we use Circle. I think Cole Nadine uses Circle too. We're going to move off of that and then launch our own like site, our own location. Don't need to pay Circle hundreds of dollars a month anymore. Um, we have the tools to build our own site. Like, why would we not do that? Why? Yeah, anyway. The UI UX bottleneck. If you've been in our little custom AI studio ecosystem over the last 2 months, this has been um, somewhat of an obsession of mine, along with a couple other things like dynamic tools. UI UX is the most important thing for wide scale adoption of agentic systems. So the old approach, I thought these would seamlessly blend into the background, right? Like you already have a tech stack. The underlying layer is the AI automation flow, whatever. The AI agent that is kind of like if you want to communicate with it, you communicate it with it in Slack or in email, just like you would an employee. And there is no additional technical debt outside of like N8N, I guess. Um, and so, it's you don't have to like sign up for a new thing, right? It's blending into the background for what you already use, right? And so the UI for an actual agent didn't think was necessary. New approach though is I think because these agents are going to primarily be tracked and judged on KPIs, performance, you have to think about them in a different way. So what we want to do is give it its own like kind of workspace and KPIs. Workspace meaning like a destination of where this thing lives, and a design a UI that is like seamless, easily accessible, and differentiated. Tracks agent activity while also like collaborative by default, right? Like this agent is working, it's doing stuff, but can I stop it? Can I adjust it? Can I whatever? Can I see what it's doing? And then showcases the system's performance as it relates to real KPIs, right? So like if you're on the customer support team, let's say you're like an executive on you're like VP of customer success, and you have like a VP's meeting, and it's you, the VP of sales, the VP of product, and whatever. So, well, the VP of customer success, like their job isn't on the line when the VP of sales, like they have a bad month, right? Like it's not necessarily it's not in their purview, right? It's not their role or responsibility, but they do rely on the VP of sales doing well for them to do well. So they're still accountable to each other, but there's more of a silo. I think that this has to be the case with human and agent, right? Agentic workflows specifically. Um, and I think it will also offload some of that responsibility. So like if you have an agent that responds on a human's behalf using a human's email, acting as if they are the human, and that response is like really bad, it's going to fall back on the human, right? Not the agent. But if you have a team, like you have an agentic system that is responsible for a set, like a business workflow or a department or a team, like what a team is supposed to be doing, right? Like the customer success team, instead of it being like a team of people, it's like one person and an agentic system that's responsible for it. It's like, okay, well, if that thing is performing uh, poorly, then no one's job is on the line, right? You improve it the next month, now it's just doing poor. Okay, it's getting better. No one's job's on the line. Now it's doing like mid, right? Okay, like it's improving over time, and it's not falling back on any like one person necessarily. Like nobody's like expected workflow or job responsibility or whatever is like being fully affected by the agent because the agent or the agentic system is responsible for an entire workflow in and of itself. They're responsible for a business outcome itself, right? So it's human plus agent collaboration, not master and tool. Where like, you know what I mean? Like if you were the master with the tool, whatever happens, it's on you. But if it's you plus another system working together, then there's silo there, right? And I think this only happens because these systems are going to be KPI judged, less like does this thing work, right? Does Gmail like load up? And what we learned, like habit change is incredibly challenging. ChatGPT is still like the number one used like LLM chatbot, despite any movement being made by the other players. Like it is the number one used, right? And people just gotten used to working with ChatGPT. My mother-in-law uses ChatGPT, or my mother-in-law. My brother's mother-in-law uses ChatGPT. My sister, obviously, she's in college, she uses ChatGPT, and she hates AI because she's like an art major and she thinks whatever. But everyone uses it. That's the go-to place. And it's still, in my opinion, has like the best UI for that chatbot experience anyway. So like what ChatGPT did for LLMs was make it very easy and accessible to interact with these things and extract value from them. And that's what allowed it to blow up. It had been around. People were using GPT models to build like SaaS for themselves, like people who are really dialed in and like following along. They were already kind of like using it to build like their own tools. But it was hard. Like you had to go into the playground, you had to do this, you had to understand the language first and all that. And then ChatGPT comes out. It's like easy to use, easy to understand. It's like magic. And now all of a sudden it blows up, right? I think Agentic needs that kind of UI ChatGPT moment. And when that happens, that's when like really this thing starts to get going. And that's honestly what we're missing. And I don't think it's just like a dashboard. Like it's there it's something, right? You can feel that it's something. It feels like a wearable. It feels like maybe it's the glasses, like whatever is kind of like frictionless, seamless, the next step. It feels like the iPhone moment, uh, you know, Google moment, I guess you could say, where like Google made it easy to traverse the internet. Um, Browser, like graphical interfaces, when that happened, it made it easy for humans to interact with the internet. It started to blow up after that. Like we're missing that kind of like what makes it frictionless for a person to use it and to change their habits. Um, Yeah. So even if we build an agent that can save an hour a day for an employee, they will stop using it the moment it breaks one time or outputs something that was not expected. That's the trust factor. ChatGPT gets stuff wrong all the time, but people still go back to it, right? Trust factor. We're treating these agents like tools where the human is still driving the process and the workflow rather than a truly collaborative approach. I think that is the key element to this UI UX problem is like that collaborative approach, right? Treat it like it's its own entity, right? Not a tool. It's easy to create a personal agent, but why is no one using it, right? At scale. Like, man, I guarantee not a ton of people are using. I guarantee the daily active user rate plummet. Like, I'm willing to guess that if you look at their chart, there's tons of signups and just a detrimental plummet of people who actually use it on a day-to-day basis. I guarantee it. And it's not because it doesn't work or it's a crappy product. I mean, it's not as good as like the hype led it to be, but like it's just because it's not actually that useful. Like it's not. It's just. I mean, Manus itself is kind of just like a tool that wasn't built to solve a problem, was supposed to be the generalized like personal agent tool that everyone is trying to build because that's like the easiest. I mean, that's where I started. That was like my first real thing that I really built was a personal agent because it's just kind of easily attainable. Um, but it's like I don't necessarily use a personal agent every day. I'm working on it because the UI UX thing is important. But the reason is because the UI UX thing, right? Like I go to ChatGPT though. I'll click the buttons to go to ChatGPT all day. And the more that thing learns about me, the better that interaction gets, right? So they're making it real sticky, making it harder for me to leave every day I use it. But for Agentic, right, Mallory, the agent that we kind of experiment with all the time, I can connect with Mallory in Slack. I can connect with it even in ChatGPT. I have a custom GPT called Mallory that has access to the tool calling on the back end, the innate and I still don't use it that much, right? So there's obviously something missing, even for someone like me who's obsessed with this stuff. There's obviously something missing. Um, yeah, why aren't people using it at scale? It's simply more reliable for you to write the actual email or send that quick Slack message or click open that URL than it is to just get the agent to do it. Like it's just more reliable at this point because you can do it half asleep because you do this stuff all the time, right? but to task like an agent to do it, it's like, well, you basically have to tell that thing what to say anyway. So like you might as well just go say it yourself. Like, what's the point? Takeaway. Unless the system owns the process end to end, it will not change. So I realize this is kind of like jumpy, like I'm making different points here. The overarching point is we have to treat these systems as entire entities that own processes rather than just tools for a human to control and trigger and task. And the interaction between this a system that owns a process and is siloed in that way and the human, that collaboration, that interaction there has yet to be developed and established and deployed. And when it is, it will release a massive bottleneck for agentic. It just will. And we're working on it. I promise you. Look at those eyes. We are working on it. Unstoppable flywheel. So this is like the most exciting one for me. I mean, that's just not true, but this is kind of like a new thing. So the ROI of our systems are much, much greater than we anticipated. You're probably seeing a lot more conversation. I've been seeing a lot in social media recently on this topic a little bit, but the old thought was like, yeah, these are great tools. The LLMs are just great tools. They're going to give one person the power of 10, 100, 1,000 plus people. Like, it's the next best tool, basically. It's the next mobile app, craze, whatever. New approach. We focus exclusively on direct ROI impact of the system because these things are performance-based, KPI driven. It's like we know, hey, you're tracking these KPIs. If we bump that number, if we double that number, what does that mean? Downstream, it's usually good, right? If we cut that number by half, what does that mean downstream, right? Usually good, right? From an ROI perspective, whatever the number is. And we need to make sure that it scales over time. The business outcomes of the workflow. So if we have the business outcomes of each workflow must be the same, if not better than the old way. Meaning, if we have let's go appointment setting. This example. So if we have an appointment setting team in Colombia who is calling the warm leads from the lead generation campaign, we're running a bunch of ads, people are filling out lead forms, and we need that Colombian team to basically it gets that lead data, picks up the phone, dials within 5 minutes, and tries to convert them from being interested to like, okay, we're going to book an inspection. Someone's going to come to your house and check it out. This is for like an interior redesign or reconstruction. Okay, we have a Colombian team. There are certain KPIs that we expect, but at the end of the day, it boils down to we need 100 grand a month in earned uh, new business. Actually, we need 100 appointments booked every single month, right? And then the actual sales will deal with down the line. But from this team who's located in Colombia, we need you guys to basically set up 100 meetings, 100 inspections. And let's say it's a team of 5. Okay. Each one has to get 20, solid KPI. Now, they're working 40 hours a week. They're selling into America, and they have, Colombian Hispanic accents, right? Which can be off-putting for some Americans. I mean, that's just like a plain fact. Um, for some, like where I live, it's actually a positive, right? Because we're in Texas. Uh, and they don't work weekends, and they make some like human error mistakes. Cool. But the business outcome is like 100 booked meetings, right? And they're pretty decent at getting that on average, those 5 folks. If we input a system, it must at least get 100 booked meetings, right? Now, it's obviously going to work 24/7. It's going to pick up the phone faster. It's going to have an American accent, and it's going to have an accent based on where the person's geographically located. And it's going to have all of these advantages to it, right? To ideally make it perform better than the Colombian team, right? But if it's not able to get just the bare minimum KPI expectation, then it's just not going to work. It's why, right? There's some trade-off, right? Because if the cost makes sense, if it's working at 80% capacity, like let's say it booked uh, 80, inspections per month as opposed to 100, but it costs like 80% less to book those 80, then it's probably worth it. Although in this scenario, the ticket every deal that you close is pretty large. So like the cost of acquiring that deal is pretty high, right? That the cost you're willing to pay to close that deal is pretty high. And so, decreasing the cost of like managing that team might be worth like one deal per month, right? If you lost one deal because you had AI instead of a human team, um, that might be worth it. But if it's two deals, if it's three deals, then it might not be worth it anymore, right? So you kind of have to do this math. And we're building a machine, right? So let me get into some of this, like what we learned. So this is the flywheel thing. Because we're talking about entire teams and departments, not just like chatbots or process automation, and the effect is pretty intense. So like business is a machine, right? There's input, some function is happening, and then there's output. Usually you input some capital, the business executes its functions, and then more capital comes out on the other end, right? And then you just reinvest and you just do that cycle over and over and over again. Well, when that machine, right, the business that's executing the function, when the price to execute the functions decreases significantly because now you've implemented uh, these agentic systems, and you have the opportunity to increase the performance, right? So like not only is it the business outcome at the end like the same but better, now you're like, okay, wow, so we can generate it's positive on both ends, essentially, right? Like the OpEx goes down, the amount of money made goes up, right? The amount of capital generated goes up, meaning the margins have increased significantly, meaning you have more money, more growth capital to reinvest into a business that has better margins, right? So it's like every dollar you put in has now, in order to get that dollar to be worth $2, it now costs less, and it's now worth $2.50 or $3. So it's like, man, this is a huge flywheel effect. And the easiest example I can give is the customer service one, like e-commerce, because e-commerce is all about media buying, and whoever can afford to pay the most to acquire the customer usually wins, right? And media buying is ads, right? If you buy a bunch of ads, you get a ton of coverage. If you have more capital that you can afford to spend on ads, then you'll likely gain more share of the market. Um, and that's just the game, right? So everything is about media buying. Whoever can pull that lever the hardest. Well, things on the back end, it means that operationally, you need to keep your margins in check. And if part of your cost base is like customer support, and you have a whole 15-person team handling customer support, that has the typical limitations of human, then and you eliminate that team, replace it with an agentic system that's cost 80% of the cost of that team, right? The 50 grand a month. Let's say this system is 10 grand a month to operate. It handles all of the tickets on time, appropriately, and it decreases the refund rate, right? So it's better at the job, it works longer and harder, and it's 80% the cost. And this one is even bigger if we talk about refund rate. So like for e-commerce, if you have like a significant refund rate, you're giving out refunds all the time. That means it lowers the value of each customer, right? The lifetime value of each customer, LTV. The higher your LTV means the higher your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, right? Which means if your LTV is super high, you can spend more money to acquire each customer, right? Which means you can dominate the media buying game that you're playing, right, against your competitors. So the goal on the operational side of things in e-commerce is to increase the LTV per customer. Part of that is decreasing the number of refunds that you're giving out, right? Another part of that is like the chargebacks, which is like, business. That's a huge, huge thing. So if we have a system that costs 10 grand instead of 50 grand a month, decreases the refund rate from 8% to 3%, the lifetime value of the customer increases significantly. The OpEx savings obviously increase, or obviously, the OpEx savings increase, but that's kind of linear, right? Like, okay, we've made that change. Now OpEx is going to be static at the like 10 grand a month. Maybe it goes up a little bit here or there, but it's about 10 grand a month. that is like baked in, right? Savings, but that's linear. When you start to talk about like the refund rate, it's like, okay, wow, now lifetime value goes up, the CAC increases, we capture more of the market. Like we know that the margins per customer is better because the lifetime value has gone up, right? Because we decreased the number of refunds. Uh, and then which makes you more money, right? So you go from like 100 customers at a value of $100 to 100 customers at a value of $120. Uh, it's just like now you have more growth capital to spend on the media buying, which gives you now 100, 220 customers, but a value of $260. My math is all over the place here, but I think you guys get it. Where like you increase that margin, it continues to feed itself exponentially, and honestly, this is a unique time where this can even happen because eventually this will just be kind of like the baseline. Like this is what people do, right? Like with phones, if you were first to have like cell phones and everyone you worked, like everyone you needed to communicate with had a phone, then you could probably transact a lot faster, right? You could get information faster, you could share information faster, and that probably gave you a massive edge, right? um, and so like that flywheel effect, just like you kept moving forward at a faster rate than anybody else, and then everybody got phones, and that's no longer an edge anymore. Eventually, this is going to happen. Everyone's going to have an agentic operating system, an underlying layer that gives them the ability. But for right now, the short period of time, like the people who do actually implement this will just, you know, the amount of growth that they'll see versus others is going to be absolutely insane. I mean, we're already seeing it with some of these startups, like getting $100 million in revenue, like in a couple months. It's insane. But when you start looking at the Duolingo CEO, what are some of the other CEOs that put out like AI first memos? There's been like three CEOs recently who put out AI first memos, and they're like drawing a hard line about AI first. I mean, it could just be that they're signaling to the market and they're slapping AI on something, and whatever, trying to just increase the value. But some of these companies are private, so like, why would they? Um, anyway, I'm gonna stop there. But I think you guys get the point. Flywheels, right? The CEOs who are putting out AI first memos and they're real about it, they will sprint ahead of anybody else. Klarna. I think Klarna, I don't know if Klarna got bought or not, but they obviously, I guarantee over the past 2 years, they've never seen anything like the growth that they've seen and the interest in getting acquired. If I can't remember if they got acquired or not eventually. Wait, let's go back to the takeaway. We're not building process automation solutions. We're building entire operating systems that will redefine industry standards, industry standard margins for almost every single industry, although some are more disruptible than others, right? The margins will be redefined and then they will shrink again. That's what will happen. Prices will drop. Prices will remain the same, if not increase, because there might be more value on the other end. And then everybody else will catch up and then start to compete on price, and price will decrease. That's what will happen. Roadmap. So team by team Agentic OS implementation. Sales team, Agentic OS implementation for that team. Customer success, Agentic OS implementation for that team. Eventually, we want to bring it all together, right? If you want to start a business, if you're operating a business, you are using Agentic OS, right? That's what you do first. You got your idea, you got your business plan, whatever. Plug it into Agentic OS, the machine, and it's got you 100 steps further than where you would have been if you started it 5 years ago, right? Given with the technology that we had 6 years ago, 7 years ago. AI consulting. So this is the last one here. And this one is a little bit of like obvious, you could probably say, especially if you are a consultant, if you're trained, or I don't know, if you've been around, you probably are like, yeah, I mean, this is obvious, kid. So know your role and stay the course. So the old approach is, whenever I got the opportunity to consult on projects that like large companies were working on, or speak with like teams who are working on their AI initiative and want like another brain to pick. I always thought that okay, they're tapping me to come on board. Like they obviously care about what I have to say, in my opinion, on this thing. I have freedom to just share my opinion openly and like stand my ground on certain things. Um, but that's not always true, right? You got to know your role. So the new approach, just quickly, is like I'm only going to consult now through the lens of Agentic OS. Like this is really about focus. Like this is what we're focused on. This is where things are going, in my opinion. So that's where I'm going to spend my time. If someone's interested in learning about that and implementing it into their business or discussing it generally, like and it doesn't have to be specifically Agentic OS, but like the idea around that, right? Centralizing the data, building an underlying operating system, not just piecemeal process automations, but it's legitimately a paradigm shift, whatever. I'm down all day, right? Um, Other smart people can talk about how to use ChatGPT, N8N, Grok, whatever. I'm not like I don't need to go through and teach you how to use ChatGPT. Like it's honestly probably going to be irrelevant at some point anyway. Like maybe not soon, but it will be at some point. It's just a chatbot experience. Like there's tons of people out there teaching this stuff to people who need to be taught this stuff, right? ChatGPT and whatnot. That's not where we want to play our own game. We're going to focus on our own products, our own projects. Like it's a waste of time, like in my opinion. So I say our own because there's a couple scenarios here where like if you're a Fortune 500 company or S&P 500 company, you have thousands of AI projects in the works simultaneously right now. Every team, I guarantee, you have tasks if you're like the leader. You've tasked all your managers to figure out how to use AI in your team. And so you got all these teams working on AI projects. And so like when I get brought into a single one, I'm not there to talk about you know, my like foundational like ideas or concepts around this, right? I'm there to help you with that specific project that you're working on, right? And a lot of times I'm the customer, right? Or I've talked to the customers, right? So I'm kind of that go-between. And it took me a while to kind of like understand this because I would just, you know, here we say like they simply want to use you as a test bed or a guinea pig to validate their efforts, right? They're looking for a brain to pick who has seen the stuff, who understands what they're looking at, what the language is, who has the scars, and they're like, hey, we're going in this direction. This is what we're building. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you think people would like this, or do you think it should work? Blah blah blah. And it's not really your job to say you guys are completely wrong. You need to do 180 the approach. Actually, you guys should just trash this project because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like it just seems like make work right now. Uh, because this is just a waste of time. Like you guys need to be focused on the real thing that matters, which is uh, either making the data more accessible to your customers or redesigning the way that this platform works, or like researching the way that your customers interact with your platform. Not whatever this is that you're doing, right? This is small potatoes, this is nothing. This is going to be like a trash project down the road. And like I can see it. You probably can't see it because you're working on it, you're in it every day. It's like your baby, I understand. But like realistically, this is a waste of time. Um, so instead of being that guy, you should be the helper, right? You should actually like, okay, this is their problem set. These are their challenges. This is where their mind's at. I'm going to chameleon my way into helping them out, right? Even though I have my own ideas. Um, Other folks, they just want to be told exactly what to do. Like, hey, how do I? It's not even necessarily. A lot of times it is how do I solve this problem, but it's just like what do I do? Just broad, right? That's where you become the expert. This is where you do uh, share your convictions about the space, right? Others, they know exactly what they want to build, but they don't know how to build it. And so they want to outsource that to you, or they want to like learn from you for how to build it. And so in this case, you're the builder. And it's not necessarily your job to like pitch a completely new process or approach to the build. You're just kind of helping them like figure out kind of the bottlenecks and the obstacles that they're running into. You just have to help them build what they want to build. Even if you think it's like kind of the wrong approach, if you're like, look, this is, yeah, you got to lay the foundations before you go this far, man. Otherwise, this thing's not going to work. You're gonna be updating it like every month. Um, but they're focused on the thing that they want to build. They obviously know that their problem's better than you do. So maybe whatever, just help them out. Um, but again, something I struggled with during this whole like being an AI consultant for the first time thing was thinking that I was getting tapped because of my uh, perspective on the space and where things are going, not necessarily my experience doing the stuff. Um, and that's what they wanted was the experience doing the stuff, not necessarily the perspective. Sometimes, right? It's it depends on the scenario. Um, so what I decided was, look, I'm focused on our own thing, right? Our own approach. If it's I'm the expert scenario, then I'm going to be there. If you're part of the community and you got a question about your build, then I'm the builder, right? But I'm not going to help you on your own product, especially if I think it's like the wrong approach. Like it's a waste of my time. Like, and I'm not trying to be like arrogant about it, but like there's only so much time in the day, and we have internal projects that are incredibly important. And if I'm spending hours every month, like working on somebody else's product that I think is the wrong approach, like who does that help ultimately? Like nobody, especially not us. So like, it's just kind of like a give. It's a trade off. Um, would like to help everybody and just kind of like dig deep on everybody's like issues and products, but this is not the position we're in anymore. So the takeaway is like to be a good AI consultant, you need to put yourself in their shoes and first understanding the objective, right? It'll help you understand the mindset and approach you need to take, right? Who are you in the scenario? Um, that's if you want to be an AI consultant, like a true blue, like I'm an AI, generally an AI consultant, right? Definitely take that approach. Roadmap. So develop and execute on our own discovery process for clients who are genuinely interested in implementing Agentic OS. So we have just like throughout our discovery process, that 4 to 6 weeks, like it's just natural consulting that happens anyway. And it's through the lens of like what we're doing here, right? Like we're implementing something holistic. We're implementing an operating system. We are like deeply embedding LLMs into into the operation, right? And so like there's obviously going to be some learning and teaching and learning from each other and exchanging and like all like that's natural. And so that's interesting, right? Like especially putting together the not only like the SOP for like what our discovery process is going to be, but then also like the actual blueprint at the end, like what that looks like. That is interesting because that to me is like, okay, this is the value, this is the real valuable thing that you need. You don't need to learn how to use ChatGPT. Who cares? Like it's easy. Just go log into ChatGPT and click and chat with it. Like it's not complicated. But for an executive who's talking about being AI native, AI first, and they want to understand how to do it, like that is an interesting discussion, right? And that's like there is no clear answer because it is a little bit custom, right? If we're talking about like exact answers to exact questions. And what I'm going to do is take consulting or speaking gigs that specifically want to hear about or learn about like our approach, or they're about this approach, right? It's about the holistic approach, not just like AI automation, process automation, chatbot, whatever, right? And then no consulting on a company's individual projects as an alpha or beta customer. No interest in that. Yeah, I think I beat that one to death. No interest in doing that, frankly. And that's it. So this was a long one. The ones in the future are going to be much shorter, probably 10 to 20 minutes. But wanted to come back with a banger, long one, and see what you guys thought. Um, Links below, community, other things, affiliate links, whatever. We're doing a rebrand here soon, which should be cool. We're on LinkedIn, webinar every Friday. Our CRO, Ross, does a really good newsletter, really good blog posts on Medium. Those will be in the description as well. Join the ecosystem if you want. All right, guys. Cheers.